Welcome to Opinion Havers, a movie podcast for salty boys. I'm Cody.
And I'm Tyler.
Here's the question, Tyler. In the movie The Two Towers, who is the salty boy?
Is it Daddy?
No. I'll give you a hint. It's extended. It's one of the extended bits. It's not in the original. Who is the salty boy?
Worm tongue. Who's salty?
No.
Someone does. Oh, Sam, because he got his salt.
Sam carries around a little tin of salts and seasonings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a big deal in the book. And they do that one little thing, and I'm like, I didn't even need that. As someone who loves the books and all that, I'm always like, why did they cut this out? I'm like, I don't know if you needed to include his box of salt.
Yeah, probably not.
So back to the Cimmerillion, as I was saying.
No. I will not allow you to do this.
No, there's no more Cimmerillion. I covered... Here's a fun fact for you. I think I covered everything that's really worth knowing about the Cimmerillion already.
in those 2 minutes?
Yep.
Tyler, how was watching it? The Two Towers. What were your impressions this time through? Was it good for you?
It was good. This is my favorite, and it's most people's least favorite. I feel like it's either your favorite or your least favorite.
Yeah.
From what people I've talked to.
Yeah.
Everybody hates it or they love it. There's no one has this as their second favorite, I feel.
That's a good point. I agree. I mean, I guess I would have to say this is my least favorite one, but I don't harbor any ill will towards it. Like, it's just I think The Fellowship of the Ring was like the movie of my childhood, like one of the movies of my childhood, and then The Return of the King is so good that this one's just not just a quarter notch not as good, you know? So it's like, it's right up there. No harsh feelings.
Can I drop a bomb on you right now?
Oh, do it.
Growing up, when I was little, I didn't like Fellowship of the Ring at all.
How dare you? Why?
I thought it was boring and dumb. This was my favorite one because I felt like there's always something going on. But people who don't like this one, the number one criticism I've heard, as I've been asking about these past few weeks, is that this is so boring and it's the most walking and the most nothing happening.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I always felt like that was the Fellowship.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
As an adult, the Fellowship, so freaking good.
Mm-hmm. It is. It is great. I don't know. They did this one so hard, and I watched so many hours of like making of the Two Towers information, but I always noticed this growing up. Like, what keeps this movie interesting is that they are able to cut between three main storylines. Where it's like, oh, what's Aragorn and his friends doing? All right, what's Frodo and Sam up to? What's Merry and Pippin up to? And they skip between those three left. It's like anytime it is like, oh, it's a little slow right now. You're like, oh, hey, what's going on with the other people? And it really works. Like, otherwise, I don't think it would work at all. And like, even hearing them talking about the writing process, like, it makes so much sense. Like, how they're able to get the movie to work. But such a fine balance. It's hard to do. They're like, in the first one, it's just the Fellowship. You follow them.
Yeah.
And that's all you got to do. And then this one, you're like, you have everyone everywhere doing everything. So you have to find a way to.
Yeah. I mean, I think
stories.
This is one of those things where I feel like if they made it now, this movie would have really felt like it didn't matter. Mm-hmm. It's very easy for this to feel like it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. Versus, I didn't mute my phone. No. Versus, feeling like it's very important and there's, some big stuff going on. Mm-hmm. But, is there anything not spoilery that you want to really dive into? The cinematography.
I certainly have nothing.
The helicopter shots.
I just wanted to tease everyone with that salty bit.
The nudity scenes.
There are far fewer dwarf butts. If that's my biggest complaint about this trilogy versus the Hobbit trilogy, I've seen 0 dwarf butts, and I'm feeling the drought. I'm feeling the thirst.
Yeah.
I got nothing else.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, if you haven't seen it, honestly, why not? Have you not?
Why are you so bad?
Everybody's like, I don't have the time, and it's like, yeah, but you're gonna binge watch 6 seasons of Dave or something, you know?
Yeah, you're gonna watch Friends for the 12th time.
Yeah. Instead of watching 6 episodes of My Name Is Earl.
Very relevant choice.
Yeah, there you go. Or The Office would be a real
thing.
The
Here's the other thing: people spent 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, just wondering who's going to win, who's going to win. Then everyone hated the finale except for 5 people. When you could watch 9 hours of Lord of the Rings with a very satisfying ending. It's like, we know that this is a tight 9 hours of one story completed as opposed to 80 hours of a story that no one's happy with. You know what I'm saying?
Can I drop a second bomb on you?
Don't. I mean, do, but...
Game of Thrones ended exactly how I thought it was going to end. I was like, the person who's going to be the king is not anybody. Nobody wants that person to be the king. Mm-hmm. Everyone's going to die or get banished or disappear for no reason. They're just going to get written off. It's not going to end well.
Just a little fairy tale ending. They were like, remember how this was like the darkest, most evil, like you saw all the good and the bad and everyone was so conflicted and real and true and whatever. And then they're like, and I don't know, that guy. You're like, all right, everyone's just cool with it.
Spoilers for the end of Game of Thrones. You're right. If they just here's the thing. They have Jaime Lannister, who is the best character arc of the entire show. Mm-hmm. And then what is the last thing they do with him? They're like, yeah, scratch all that.
I won't say any names. I won't throw any spoilers because I've only seen the first and last season. But if you having watched the first season of Game of Thrones, then watching the last episode, I wouldn't have even known it was the same show.
Yeah.
Just like, this isn't even the same thing.
It's wild, man. It goes places, and then they go a direction, and you're like, oh, yeah, I like this. And then like, all right, all those people died. Now let's go this direction. And you're like, I hate you all. They should have... like
the worst ADD writing. We're like, how did you have this much focus for this long and then just give up on it?
I tried reading those books, right? And I quickly realized, like, Benioff and Weiss should have immediately been like, all right, George, you're not involved anymore. Mm-hmm. We've got the groundwork here. We got the gist of what you want to do here. You're out. Burn all of his books. We're not following his storyline at all. They would have been a way better show.
Would have been really interesting if they did like follow the first 2 books and then just like go their own direction and do something totally different.
That's what supposedly they did. I wish they'd done it more.
Yeah.
Honestly. That's why I'm excited because they're the ones doing... Are they doing Lord of the Rings or are they doing the Star Wars show? Or just both?
I forget.
I think they're doing something with Star Wars.
That's the rumors. They were like, they got offered a Star Wars series. They're like, and that's when Game of Thrones is like hit its lowest point. Like, everyone just phoned it in because they were ready to hop on that Disney Star Wars bandwagon.
Yeah. I would like to see them do a Lord of the Rings show because it's better source material.
Yeah.
I think they're good at doing the fantasy stuff. Anyway, into the spoilers for the 20-year-old movie.
Let's do it.
Let's hop up on. What did you say? What did you say when they said Treebeard? You're like, what is? You'd be like, that'd be like my name being like Man Face.
Oh yeah.
Hop up on Man Face with me.
I'm here. I'm swinging.
Let's walk into Spoilershire Townburg. We're here.
Treebeard. He is a tree. He has a beard. I don't...
Yeah. Which is funny, because that's one of those things, like, I probably, in the extended edition, if I was doing it, would have had him, like, introduce himself, do his, like, longer introduction, where he says, like, oh, I can't say my Entish name because it's so long, because I've lived so long.
2 days or whatever.
Well, no, he's like, it would take, I think he said it takes, like, 60 years to pronounce it, and by the end you have to keep saying things because what their names are is like their name is their life story in Entish. So he's like, so we're not gonna get into that, but his name is Fangorn. Because he's the
it's Fangorn Forest.
Yeah, it's his forest, so they named the forest after the Ent.
Oh, okay. Let's spoil stuff at the end.
So that's what the Greenwood is has his green? Is it green or Greenwood? What's the Ent's name there? That's what I want to know.
That's a good question.
He's dead. It's fine. Nobody cares.
Oh, no. The Ents. There haven't been Entlings in a long time. They lost the Entwives. I thought that was...
like, oh, I'm sorry.
Not like a funny thing. But it's like, we lost them. They don't know where they went.
Yeah.
Do you think... Here's my question. Are the Entwives lost, or are they in hiding? Did they run away?
They go into the story at some point
don't.
of the book. I don't know if it's then or if it's later, but they go into the whole how they lost Here's what. Let me add a detail that's going to make it even better. So they were together, the Entwives and the Ents, and they were doing it and getting it on and having a great old life. But the Entwives, which they describe like beautiful, like nymphs, you know, basically, like I think that's almost what you're supposed to envision them as.
Okay.
But you're like, there's no way. But apparently they liked staying in one spot, building up gardens, and the Ent dudes, they're like, we're going to want to wander. We want to walk around in the wilds of the world and do stuff. Mm-hmm. So they would stay for as long as they could until they couldn't take it anymore. Then they would walk away. Then they would come back eventually, like 1,000 years later or something crazy. And eventually they were all gone and all looked at each other and they're like, I don't remember how to get back. And that's how they lost them.
What?
They either did that or they eventually got back after like way long, and they got back and they're like, they're all gone. So that's how they lost them. They forgot how to get home. They didn't lose them.
Imagine
like they
being
were...
a tree and walking for 500 years and like, yeah, my wife and kids.
Exactly. That's what they did. And they're like, where are they? I don't know. We walked by a mountain. All the mountains are different. But that's what happened.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, so there's something at the very end of the series where they're like, and then they see Ents walking around looking for the End wives. It's like, you guys are never going to find the wives. You don't even remember what they look like. You could have seen them 1,000 times. You're not going to
Can't call their name because it's going to take 60 years every time.
They don't remember their names for the most part. I think Fangor or Treebeard's unique because he can remember his wife's name.
Oh.
But most of them can't.
I didn't know Treebeard's voice is John Rhys Davies, who does Gimli. I didn't know that.
Gimli also, it works because he's the tallest of the Fellowship. He's 6'1".
It makes sense. It was fun watching the making of because they were talking about like Merry and Pippin. They have this big animatronic Treebeard, right, to do all the swinging and moving, and they have to sit on these like the worst bike seats ever in the middle of his hand, you know, and they're swinging around and like it's like squishing around all their family jewels and all that stuff, and then you just see like John Rhys Davies like sitting in a Hawaiian shirt reading off Treebeard's lines. You're like, oh, you got it easy.
Oh yeah,
I got that impression a lot about him because when they talk about like the big running scenes they had to do with Aragorn and Legolas, like we had to wake up at 4 a.m. and go out camping to get these shots and do all the running, and Legolas had a split rib and I had I had a broken toe and they were like running through everything, and then it's just Gimli. You're like, oh. It's just his stunt double that does all the running. Yeah. He didn't have to go and do any of it.
Yeah, because I think I don't know if it was in the making ofs or something, or if it was somewhere else I saw where they're like, all right, now you're going to do the running scene with him. And he was like, no, I'm not.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is, like, they have to use the double because he's so tall. Yeah. And unless they were going to do the perspective stuff, like, they just needed the right size person to go running through. So he's like, yeah, didn't have to go.
Oh. He's so much of a... It seems like at all times he just didn't want to be there, which is really funny.
Yeah.
You know?
I think it's just funny because, like, I mean, he's the old man, right? Like,
yeah.
It's like him and, I mean, Ian McKellen and,
but you have, like,
what's his name for sure?
But Christopher Lee was, like, he just so excited to be in the movie.
Yeah.
And even Ian McKellen, I'm sure, just thinking about, like, because he's, like, the classically trained, like, actor, right, that like performed in plays and stuff like that. So I mean, you gotta imagine he had an appreciation for Tolkien,
definitely
on some level. But then you have John Rhys Davies, who's probably like, "What movie? What is it? Who? What? Nah, whatever. I gotta do what makeup?
Oh gosh, yeah.
Telling me not to hit the stuntmen. I'm gonna smack these stuntmen.
Hit them all.
I'm gonna make them regret the day they were born."
I know last episode I talked about how I wanted the shoot-off episode of the Sackville Bagginses. I was wrong. I want a shoot-off movie of the Balrog. What's a day like in the life of the Balrog? I want to see his side of the story, and at the end have like a 30-minute battle scene with him again. That's what I want. I want the Balrog story told from the Balrog's perspective. Is there a little Balrog wife? Is there a little Balrog Jr.? Like, what are they doing? Does he have a couch? What does it look like?
Yeah. I do like the direction they went because I know in the books he's described as very much like he is all flame and shadowy and all that, but he's more the size of Gandalf, I think, or a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
I like that they made him huge like that. Mm-hmm. Made him more epic. But I do want to make a note real quick here, going back to all the way on the Wayback Machine, you know, all the way back to the last movie. When the Balrog's coming up, Gandalf says what is probably the coolest line that has the most like meaning and lore behind it. The Balrog scene in general, really.
Yeah.
Because you start off with them surrounded by the orcs, right? Balrog roars. Orcs are like, good luck, and they peace out.
Yeah.
Like, what looks like 20,000 orcs just dip. They're like, we're not even going to try with this. We're gone. And then everybody's like, what's happening? And then Gandalf says what it is. He says it's a Balrog of Morgoth. That's how he says that. Balrog of Morgoth. And I don't know if you noticed this. The panic on Legolas's face.
I didn't notice it.
Like, everybody else is like, what? And Legolas is like, oh my gosh, we're going to die. Because he knows what it is. And then he ends his little spiel about it by saying one line, Cody. He says, do you know what he says, Cody?
I don't want to butcher it. I think I know the line you're saying. It says,
this enemy is beyond any of you. Run. He doesn't say it's beyond any of us. He says beyond any of you, which is something cool because he's like, I'm the only one that can fight this thing. Yeah. And I'm scared of it.
Yeah.
Run. So, because they're both Maiar in the war rule, which like they're like not demigods, they're like angels, like powerful angels kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which I found out, I actually looked into why doesn't Gandalf just use his incredible amounts of power to just solve the problem, and it's because him and the rest of them were told not to.
Really?
Because it's so destructive, it just lays waste all the mortal realms when they
interfere too much.
Well, when they like use their god powers to fight, like if he had fought Sauron 1-on-1,
like if Gandalf went Super Saiyan, it would crumble the whole mountain.
Yeah, so it would just kill too many people. They're like, it's not worth it. They can take it out as long as you kind of keep it on the down low. Like you don't use your powers too much, they won't use their powers too much because they'll be afraid of you using your powers and all that. So
interesting.
That's why they're not supposed to.
It's such a cool opening to the movie. Because you're like over the mountain, and then you're like, oh right, Gandalf fell, and then it's like, oh, here's what happened when he fell. Yeah. And it's epic fight. Balrog has no excuse looking this good, this fine, 18 years later.
Oh, it's so good.
He looks great.
That was the note. I found a thing of like, so that is not in the book at all. This scene where it shows their fight. Yeah. It was. I'm trying to see where it specifically says. So. It was Peter Jackson. He was inspired thanks to a painting that John Howe did. John Howe, we were talking about before we started, the same guy who did the Orthunk painting. Yeah. That they based the whole tower off of. So it's a whole scene based on him thinking like, oh, this would be a cool thing to paint. Yeah. And him being like, yep, I want to see that happen. It's a cool fight thing.
It's really cool. But, and then I did appreciate this movie because then when they meet up with Gandalf later in the forest, and they obviously think he's Saruman because there's like, oh, the White Wizard will know who you are, and they meet the White Wizard. Aragorn and Legolas also meet him later. Turns out it's Gandalf. I never fully I knew there's like, oh, Gandalf's back to life. He's not gray anymore. He's white. I don't know. I just like because I saw this when I was so young, I never quite connected it. I'm like, I guess he's resurrected or whatever. I kind of like that they explained it a little more in the extended version. They're like, oh, I'm Saruman the White as he should have been. Where it's like, Saruman the White's fallen, so now, like, the gods have sent me to take the place of, like, being that force of good.
Yeah, the main foe. Because they were sent to fight Sauron, I think. Or to oppose him, not to fight. They were never supposed to directly fight him. They're supposed to do... Gandalf is the only one that does what they're supposed to do, which is go around to people and, like, try to convince them to fight against Sauron and try to rouse the people to... gather their armies and march out to meet the bad guys and do that kind of stuff and try to keep evil in check in that way. That was their role. Yeah. The Blues, they just effed off. They decided to not do that at some point. Radagast went crazy. And Sauron
all those shroomies and pipies he's smoking.
It yellowed his teeth.
It's no good. Those birds living in his hair.
Yeah. I don't know.
Spoiled his brain with their feces.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Or Radagast.
Yeah, he's a poor boy.
Poor guy. Here's the thing about this movie. I really liked all the extended scenes in Fellowship. In this one, I was honestly kind of 50-50 on them. Okay. Part of me kind of, like, half the scenes they added, I was like, that's really cool. The other half, I was like, well, I don't know. I think I could have kept it out. Because it already is, I mean, it is, of the movies, it's the most difficult to pace and, like, structure, because it's, like, the finale's in the next one, and it's always tough to split a story into 3 parts, you know?
Yeah.
But I don't know, there's a scene where they make Pippin drink, like, the orc medicine grog stuff, you know? And, or they make Mary drink it. I don't know. I was like, the whole time I was like, I'm uncomfortable. I didn't like it. It didn't add anything for me, you know? Yeah. It's like, I kind of like when they just showed them and they're like, oh, they spit down their little elven clasp thing for their robe to help them track them, and that was all I really needed, you know?
Yeah, I almost wonder if that scene wasn't filmed when they were planning on doing more, because there's lots of stuff in the book where it's like the orcs and the Uruk-hai and them, you know, the orcs are from Mordor and the Uruk-hai are from Isengard. There we go. Yeah, mounted it real sensually to me there. You know, and like them disagreeing and like on stuff was more of a thing in the book, and I was almost like, it seems like they were gonna do that, and then they were like, nah, and they just left in that introduction where they're like, those are orcs and those are Uruk-hai. Now you know.
Yeah. Also, it's fun.
Yeah.
Just something blew my mind as I was watching the making of. So the guy who plays Wormtongue is 1, American, and 2, not in any way pale. He's like a tannish American dude who looks like he could almost be from like Louisiana or something. Like,
yeah.
Anyway, so when I heard him talk, I was like, oh, he's like one of the only American actors in this, because everyone else is from some Commonwealth, you know, from New Zealand or Australia or England or Scotland or something.
Yeah.
So that kind of threw me, but as I was watching this movie, I had an epiphany. So they did all that work to give him black hair and the pale skin and all that. I'm like, just get Jack White in here. He would have played Wormtongue in a second. He's already there. Would've. You make his hair a little long, boom. Jack White is Wormtongue, you know?
Imagine Jack White.
Of course, he would have, like, insisted on having some, like, old folk instrument, and he would have, like, done songs. So I guess it wouldn't have worked out, but
yeah.
As soon as I was like, Jack White.
I was going to say, I was like, can Jack White act? And then I remembered, this is what came to my mind when I thought that. Have you seen the comedy special with Jack White in it? Or it's Rory something?
Yeah, I think we watched that together.
Yeah, it's got Jack White. And I'm like, he did really good in that little short.
He can play like a straight man, you know, in a comedy bit, basically.
So
he's also in an episode of Portlandia.
Yeah.
Fred Armisen plays a guy who makes like this really high quality studio in the middle of the woods, and he's like, one day, man, someone's gonna come, one of the greats gonna come here and record. He's like, these are like the same mics they use on Pet Sounds. Like he has like this whole setup, all these like old school mics and whatever. And he's like, and like Jack White like vaporizes out of the woods. He like appears and he's like, I got all this great equipment in here. Like you want to record something? He's like, all right. And like it's like the same mics they use on Pet Sounds. Like, anyway,
yeah.
So yeah, he can act.
Yeah. As long as all of his scenes are only like a minute or two at a time.
Oh yeah,
they get it. He can do it. I do like the guy that played Wormtongue. He's better than the guy who played Frederick or whatever in The Hobbit. Frank, what's his name? Albert. That was his name.
The man who was shoved down through the esophagus of a troll.
Yes.
Yeah, that
better, much better.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a great movie. All right, obviously, it's very good. I like all of it. Eowyn is interesting because in the extended version, she does a little funeral song, a little swan song, you know, for her uncle, father, cousin, brother. Uncle, father, cousin, brother.
Yeah.
Cousin,
sure.
brother,
cousin.
Brother?
No.
Cousin.
Uncle.
Cousin.
Her uncle's the king, cousin's the prince. Her brother is the cool dude with the long ponytail on his helmet.
Okay. But then they also have a scene where it's like, because obviously she's like into Aragorn a little bit.
Oh, well, a lot of it.
And then, but there's a scene where she like brings him some stew, and he's like, "Oh, thanks." And obviously, it's like terrible. And you're like, I don't know. Didn't add anything to it. I was like, oh, she sucks at stew. I don't know. I kind of like when she was a little more mystery to her, and it was like, oh, and then she like does really cool stuff in the next movie. You know?
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't need to know she was bad at cooking stew.
Well, yeah. I don't know if there was a point to it, unless maybe you could be like, oh, it shows that
she is like royalty, right?
Good.
So she's not going to be as...
She's not good at the home stuff.
Yeah, she's not going to be she's not going to make a better waifu than Arwen. Nailed it. Yeah. Got the name right.
You got there in the end. Also,
they have the whole scene where they talk about Aragorn, and they're like, how old are you? You're an old man. Oh, you're like from that old race. That's cool. Yeah. You're 87.
Because he rode into battle with her grandfather.
Yeah, that's I mean, I can't think of a bigger turn on.
Yeah, he's an old man.
And I didn't know that he spent time at Rivendell when he was a boy. Aragorn.
You still didn't know that?
I didn't know that until we watched this extended version of this movie.
The second edition, the second movie. They talked about it in the last movie. You mentioned that you didn't know. You said the exact same thing in the last episode of the podcast.
I gotta see it twice. I gotta say it twice. Remember, in fact, I'll probably say something about it in the next movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't know that. It was cool. I was like, oh, that makes sense. Why the elf lady would like him.
Speaking of the Dunedain Rangers of the North.
Mm-hmm.
The one of the things that I wish, I like the end like battle sequence and it going. I do kind of wish, but I feel like you have to do it in a show, not in a movie. Doing like the whole sequence of events that happen in the book, because it's much more like there's a lot more steps to it and a lot more things that are happening. Like what's his face was a different character. Not the guy that Gandalf went and got. Éomer.
Yeah.
So he was a different character in the book. Éomer was with him in the books, and it was like a different guy. But they're like, "Where's George?" And they're like, "George and his huge army are holed up in his castle because they're being attacked by a different army." And it's like, all right, I understand it's getting a little complicated.
Yeah.
Let's simplify this down. But one of the things that's the coolest is guess who shows up before all the battling starts?
Who?
A bunch of Dunedain Rangers.
Really?
Like a whole squad of them. And they're like, hey, Aragorn, you're our chief. Haven't seen you in a while. Because he's the chief of their whole tribe.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, he's the
right.
heir to be the king.
Yeah.
So he's the chief.
Carries around the shards of that sword or whatever.
Yeah. That reminds me of the one thing. I have it a note later. But it's like one of my favorite quotes in the whole book series. But it just doesn't work because he doesn't have the sword yet. Because of how they rearranged his story in the movies. So he has the reforged sword at this point in the books. And so when they take all their weapons, he hands that sword to a dude there at the castle of the Horse King, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What's his face? And he looks at the guy and he says, he's like, no man can draw this sword but the King of Gondor. If I find out you've drawn... He says, if I find out you've drawn it, you'll die as soon as you draw it. He's like... Actually, I think he says he'll destroy him if he draws the sword.
Really?
He makes it clear, you can't... It's not like, I don't want you to. It's like, you can't. It's like a law of the universe that you cannot draw this sword.
Wow.
So it makes it very unclear, will Aragorn come out and, slit this guy's throat, or will the sword destroy this guy?
Yeah.
Because it's supposed to be a magic sword. But there's also, a scene where he's fighting a bunch of people, and, a bunch of orcs, and he draws the sword, and they're like, oh, shoot, and it's 500 orcs run away from him when they see the sword. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
It's the same thing, how Sauron was with his big mace?
Yeah.
He was doing that to orcs with the sword.
Really?
Blasting a ton of them off of giant ladder and stuff, or steps.
Like in A Link to the Past, when you're at full health and you shoot out thingies out of your sword.
I don't play nerd games. Yes, but yes.
Here's a question for you.
I just want the Rangers.
How much can Gimli bench? Let me paint a picture for you. There's a warg fight. Giant warthog wolves with orcs on them chase down the people. There's a big old fight. One of them falls on Gimli. He is pushing it up until another one falls down on him. I'm like, how strong is this man?
Well, I'm trying to think. What is he? He's pushing it up.
There's
kills the orc.
He snaps an orc's neck and it's crawls over it.
Yeah.
And he's pushing that all up. And then another one falls on him and then he can't do it.
Doesn't he push up both of them a little bit? He just can't push them all the way up.
I think he's pushing up that one and then another one falls on him and then he can't.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, those things were not small. He was a strong boy. Strong, stocky boy. I mean, that's probably a 400, 450-pound bench, would you say?
Probably. I mean, those things are supposed to be almost... I mean, they're almost the size of horses.
Yeah.
They're big. That's big. A ton. My eyes glossed over a fact, and it's about John Rhys Davies. Speaking about Gimli. He's missing the end of his left middle finger.
I saw this in the making of stuff.
He once pranked Pete by pretending to have cut the end of his finger.
The makeup guy gave him a prosthetic tip to his finger.
Yeah.
So that he could and they put blood in the middle of it. So he'd be I think I cut my finger. Then he peeled it back and all the blood shot out.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Also, I didn't know this, but all the wargs are 100% CG, with the exception of one or two shots where they have some practical stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They just filmed people riding around on horses pretending to fight, and then they had to CG everything in and choreograph a whole fight scene.
Yeah.
That's crazy. They didn't plan it out beforehand. They were all right, just do what you can, then we'll have all these digital artists go in and...
It looks so good.
And it looks great. I wouldn't have even known that it wasn't planned.
The only place I can tell they did something like that is at the very end of the movie when they're doing their final ride out. You can tell they just had them ride and swing their swords. Because there's points where they're not swinging at anything.
Yeah.
And it's but it's they're zoomed way out and you have to really focus on the guys in the back and they're the ones that you can tell they're not really swinging. And it's oh, okay. But there was a scene where I could really tell, now that I know everything in Isengard, speaking of doing all the digital stuff.
Yeah.
Now that I've seen the videos, which you may have seen them, I think they're in the making of, where they show the bigatures, the miniatures, and they show them bringing the water in and it knocking, specifically that big, scaffolding getting knocked into the hole. Every time I can so clearly see that is a miniature now, but it's still it looks like there's little orcs running around on it and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm I can tell this is small.
It's crazy that it is. It's just a small thing, but you don't think about it. You're oh, that big old bridge is falling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks so good.
It really does. I learned something cool. So when they have the wild men going through and burning the villages of some of the people, the villages of Rohan.
Yes.
So they had to make these thatched hay roofs for them all, right? And then they lit them on fire, and then the whole set burned down, and the cameraman had to run away because there's such strong wind. And so that was an actual fire that burned everything down.
Nice.
Everyone left, and then they were in the making up too, they're Jim's the safety guy. Here's everyone was safe. They did not plan for those winds, all that stuff to burn down the way it did. He's everyone's fine.
Jim's just some guy. He's not even a
everyone's still safe.
He's but did you die? Nailed it.
Pretty great.
You can give me a 5-star rating on Yelp.
No one died. 10 out of 10.
Wood safety again. Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing what they did for this one, because the Hall of Rohan, where the king is and everything, all of that is a set that they built. They scouted forever to find it, because it's supposed to be a lone hill in a big valley. They found it. It's this crazy windy place. The conservation group around of the government was yeah, you can use it, but you have to replace everything immediately after. So they spent like 8 months taking off all like the topsoil and everything, putting it into its own little nursery for it to live for 8 months.
Yeah.
They built everything. It was there for like a week or two to do the shooting. They tore it all down and then replaced all the foliage and stuff, and then left.
Wait. Rewinding it, because I read a fun fact right as you start. You're talking about the village that burned down, right?
No.
Okay.
I'm talking about like the Hall of Rohan, like where the king lives. And
Okay.
everything, that hill.
That's what I thought. I changed it over to me thinking. I was like, was it? Which one? Which place is he talking about?
So the Hall of Rohan, they built that in 8 months, used it for a week, and then tore it all down and replaced all the grass and everything that was there.
So they actually built a little thing up on the cliff. Like
yeah, that was a real thing that was there for just as long as they needed to shoot, and they had to take it all down.
Here's what I want to know. So, when they made Skyrim, they just copied that, the Whiterun, right? It's the exact same layout.
Well, it's interesting because it's supposed to be like based on Beowulf. So it's like the hall from Beowulf, that's basically the inspiration for it. Okay. So it's like very Middle English, like Old English, Anglo-Saxon, whatever.
Yeah. Which makes sense. I mean, because they're basically like Vikings with horses instead of boats. And the guys from Skyrim, the Nords from Skyrim are, fun fact, basically Nords. Like Vikings from real life. And then, yeah. So.
And even like when, what's her name? When Eowyn does her funeral song thing, that's in like Anglo-Saxon, like Old English.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah. That's such a cool town.
I learned some cool stuff about like
Tell me.
Gollum's performance. Andy Serkis. It was like a whole thing. They were originally like, "Oh, we're just gonna CG in Gollum," and then once they found the actor for it, they realized like, "Oh gosh, we're in over our heads. We might have to like have him do the reference shooting," and then they were just gonna have him do the voice acting. Then he got there and then started doing reference shooting for everything, and they're like, "Oh, we can have him do all the scenes, act everyone, then they'll paint over him." And then they're like, "No, we got to figure out how to do like the motion capture for him." And like they had to go through all these processes, and some shots is mostly motion capture, some it's mostly like all digitally animated. But they like recreate the computer model for Gollum based on Andy Serkis because like it just doesn't look like him, and they can't match his facial expression. It's crazy the amount of work they went through to do it.
Yeah. And he was so involved in it. That's why like Andy Serkis is usually like, if you have a heavy motion capture movie, even if he's not a character in it, which is rare, he's going to be like a second unit director for the motion capture stuff. Because he's like, I mean, even if I was going to make a movie and I was like, we need someone who knows motion capture, I'd be like, well, I mean, I guess we're calling Andy Serkis.
I mean, they pioneered the whole thing, and they talked about how to like really fight to be in it, and he's like, no, like he needs to be a big part of this, and it really paid off. And it is a bummer. I remember at the time hearing about like, oh, he's not nominated for best supporting actor or whatever it was, and it's crazy because his performance is incredible. Because
wasn't it a big thing of where they were like, but it's a CG character, it's not him.
Exactly.
And so it was before.
And then literally 10 years later, Avatar, they're like, great job, everyone. We want to appreciate everyone for handing our performance. For like the actors talk about like, oh, it was great to like trust the animators had performance and vice versa. And you're like, well, now it's acceptable, but at the time it was such a new thing. They were just like, no, you're not really acting. Like it's just computers. You're like, well, completely changed the way they created the character based on that performance.
Yeah,
but it's also like, shouldn't voice actors be not like eligible for Oscars?
Well, that's a big thing. But it's a big thing where there's like they're just like the movement where they stop. Well, like they tried to stop calling it motion capture and calling it like performance capture.
Yeah,
there's the big thing, and I know now. I noticed it especially in video games, but it's also in just like every voice acting thing where they voice actors call themselves like and say that they're actors and trying to like, and a lot of actors will refer to them as actors, directors will refer to them as actors because they're like, I mean, they're the same. There should be under the same everything, but
yeah, Gollum, such a great character. I don't know. I just love that he plays with like, he's so childlike at sometimes, and you really like him. At other times he's so menacing and like twisted, and you feel disgusted by him. But I thought that's such a hard character to capture, and he did such a good job on it.
Yeah, and it is really, it's because Andy Serkis is so good at doing that. Yeah. Like you take like in like Black Panther where he plays Claw.
Uh-huh.
Where he is someone who's like, he's a terrible person who's killing people, but he's having so much fun doing it, you know?
Yeah.
Or, you know, I mean, it's like him and, was it Shralto Coppola, is that how you say his name, I think? Shralto Coppola, something. We've had this discussion before where you don't know who he is, and then I show him, and you're like, oh, yeah, that guy. It's the guy from District 9.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
Okay.
Yeah, because he's like got the South African British name that's confusing.
Is it Andy Serkis also South African?
Probably.
Because they both, I feel like, they both are very good at playing whatever role. Like, I feel like you give them any role and they could nail it.
He's English.
He is?
He's from the UK.
Oh, okay.
Rural Slip Manor. I don't know. You tell me. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows with the British people? You know, I try to not. I've already got beef with France. I don't need to start it with the UK, you know?
We can't afford it.
Yeah. The legal fees with this whole France feud are
Where do I even go to convert my money into pounds, you know? Can I still pay with euros? Where are we at with all that?
You just go buy a pound of flour. They say, here's 5 pounds.
Here's pounds of stuff. You have to accept it. That's the rule.
What do they call their dollars?
Pound sterling.
No. There's the slang, like a more slang term. Quid.
Quid, yeah.
Where did that come from?
I don't know.
You'd be like, Buck, well, where did bucks come from? I don't know, but I'm not going to defend it the way that they defend quid.
5 quid. I mean, I just don't respect the currency of any country that uses a hay penny, you know?
Yeah.
I can't get behind it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't, you know, get with the times, you know? They're like, our money is multicolored and plastic. That makes it better. It's like, yeah, but it's monopoly money.
Oh, Andy Serkis is going to be in the new Venom movie.
Yeah.
That's fun. Oh, he's the director. No, he's not.
Yeah. He's at least one of the directors.
That's pretty cool. He's listed as the main director here.
He's the main director now?
That's interesting.
I knew he was involved. I was like, but I mean, like I said, if you want a performance capture movie, a heavy performance capture movie, it'd be really good. You probably want him involved.
He's the dude. But yeah, it was crazy. They talked about it because he had to wear this like little white suit with like tighty whities over it, like during his performances.
You've seen him.
It's so awful. But like, he does so much physical stuff for Gollum. So he's like scuttling around on rocks and falling over and scraping himself all up. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, he goes for it.
He really went for it. And it gave him so much to work with to create the character.
Speaking of going for it, you were talking about Viggo Mortensen having a broken toe.
Oh,
did you see that?
Yes, I did see it.
The scene, he broke 2 toes.
I didn't know that. Because I already heard he broke his toe. He broke 2 toes, which is crazy.
Kicking the helmet for the 5th time.
Yeah.
That's why he screams, because he's like, no, I'm just going to roll with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he kicks the helmet, screams in rage. And then I also learned later on in the Helm's Deep scene, he chipped his tooth, one of his 2 front teeth, with a sword during like one of the sword fights in Helm's Deep. And he was like, let's just get some super glue. We got to keep rolling. And they're like, no, we're taking you to an emergency dentist and we're shooting other things. Yeah. We're not super gluing your tooth back into your head.
He's very...
He's a man. Well, he's such a... Yeah. We talked about he's such a gentle daddy, but like... Even in the interview, he's like, it's only a big deal because I'm an actor. Like, happens to stuntmen all the time, and it doesn't even matter. Like, you're so tender, so sweet. Yeah.
But to be fair, like, that's exactly what, I mean, it's like the same reason why some people think, like, it is cool, but a lot of people, especially in the film industry, don't like people like Tom Cruise. Because they're like, look, dude, if you fall and bust up your nose, we're all out of a job, which is fair. Like, if a stuntman does it, that's his job to be there to get busted up.
Yeah. And also, like, if you do your own stunts, then a stuntman can't do them. And that's, like, a job taken away from...
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, it is a risk for the production. I still don't know where I stand on it, honestly, because I've heard people say both ends, but also, like... Tom Cruise, like, it also makes the editor's job a lot easier if the actor is doing the stunts, because, like, we don't have to worry about cutting and being behind him and whatever. Like, you can show any angle and it looks correct.
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, like, everybody's like, oh, but there's no, like, we're all out of a job. But I know it's Tom Cruise and there's someone else who does a lot of their own stunts. They get insured for so much money.
Yeah.
They get insured for the budget.
I mean, Orlando Bloom did as many stunts as he could on this movie.
Yeah.
And I think in The Hobbits, once he did all his own stunts.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they get insurance.
But I mean, to be fair, like,
that.
there's the scene where, like, Legolas slides down the stairway on an orc shield.
Oh.
But he was like, the stuntman went and tested it several times, and we tweaked it and got it as big as we could, and then I went in and did it. So I was like, the stuntmen are still helping. Like, they still do all the testing and stuff. So, I mean, you know, who's right?
Yeah, plus no one was going to be upset, I think, being like, Lord of the Rings not employing enough stuntmen when the armies of hundreds were all stuntmen.
Crazy how many stuntmen they had.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, they talk to you about how, like, all the Uruk are these Maori boys and, like, rugby players and big guys. There's even, like, one girl who's one of the orcs, one of the Uruk-hai. And then they're like, yeah, so then for the elves, we just got as many, like, art students and, like, thin, slender, tender boys, you know, to be, like, the elves. And, like, the Rohan riders, like, we have so many, like, good female horse riders, like, almost all of them are women, like, the riders of Rohan. It's just interesting, but they talked about, like, you know, like, the Maori people, like, a lot of them have, like, a lot of the stuntmen are like, oh, we're black belts in martial arts, or like they come from like that background, so like, oh, they can do drills and whatever, and then like they get all these art students to be elves and stuff, and they're like, we had to train them how to march, because the elves are all like well coordinated and they do all their stuff together and they're marching and everything. So they had to teach them how to like march and do commands and all that stuff. It's just kind of funny. They're like, you see all those like big stuntmen and martial artists and whatever. Like, we had to get really thin people to play the elves, like.
I think you can really see, because it feels like they focus on the orcs fighting the main guys, the main characters, a lot more than you really don't even, in a lot of backgrounds, the elves don't feel like they're putting up a lot of a fight. And I'm like, well, because it's stunt dudes who could probably like throw up 2 sharpened swords, can catch them without cutting themselves, and then fight 20 of those people, versus dudes who are like, so this is what a bow feels like, huh?
Yeah.
It's like, well, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't show them fighting each other very often, because I feel like we might actually kill a film student or two.
Yeah.
Like an art student.
That Hell's Deep scene's interesting, too, because it was a 4-month shoot, and 3 months of it was at night. So it was like 3 months of night shoots. They're like, it was awful to do. And like, 2, they talked about, you know, they have all these prosthetics the orcs have to slip into, so it looks like they have that like dark, like reddish toned skin, you know? And like, well, it's raining, and so they're like dumping rain on these. They have to try to get them dried out for the next day's night shoot, and it's just like, they're just crazy, like how difficult the shooting of it was. And you feel like 3 months, that's enough time to shoot a movie.
Yeah.
Versus this is just
that's
like
more
one
than
scene
it took
movie.
them to shoot all on set or on location stuff for the Hobbit movies.
Yeah.
What do we say? It was 9 weeks of on set or like on location shooting for all
Something
3
like
movies.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a year and a half of on location shooting for these 3 movies.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's almost like one is much better.
Almost better.
Yeah, almost though, but not the most best. But what?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
And also going back a little bit to Gollum, they talked about like Andy Serkis had his Gollum juice, because like that voice has to shred your vocal cords, right? Doing all those sounds he does, and those. So like he has a thing. It's basically just like lemon juice, honey, and ginger, and he's always he showed him his little mug, always sipping it like between scenes, so he could keep doing the voice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it must have, because I mean now when he talks, like he just has a gravelly voice now, and I'm always thinking like, it's got to be from Gollum. Like, that must have destroyed his voice.
Well, because the thing is, he had to do all those scenes in person, all the references, and he's trying to do all the acting so that his scene partners, Frodo and Sam, can give as good performances as possible.
Yeah.
And then they have to go in and redo all those voices. Because you, like, with all the stuff going on the day, you can't really use that voice. He has to go and re-record everything.
Did you know Aragorn's horse Brego was also a last-minute replacement?
His
and
what?
Thus they hit Brego.
What?
His horse.
Uh-huh.
So he was last-minute replacement, just like Viggo Mortensen was.
Oh,
So they had a strong emotional connection because of that.
They did. I mean, they got him up on that horse like from laying down. It was pretty cool. Like,
Yeah.
they had the horse kneel down and like lick his face, and then he like grabbed on and got pulled up.
So he would get up early and go and saddle up the horse and take care of it, and even spent some nights sleeping in the stable with him.
So he's the softest.
I really feel like
tenderest
you could
daddy.
take every fact of Viggo Mortensen from Lord of the Rings and just be like, show that all these facts to who's the other crazy dude that we talked about? Who's also the crazy character actor?
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Daniel Day-Lewis, and he'd be like, "Yeah, this is a crazy person." You know, like he'd be like, "I'm not sleeping in the stables with a horse.
Yeah.
I'll go sleep in a mud pit to get the dirt real." You know, thank you very much.
I'm gonna stick my feet in a puddle of oil to prepare to be an oil baron, but I'm not sleeping with a horse.
Okay, what? Did he do that?
Probably.
Okay.
I think he spent time in like a oil drill stuff to like learn about that for There Will Be Blood. It is a good movie. I will say the extended version is a little more. I don't know. It is longer, and since this movie is, I don't know. I don't feel like the pacing of the extended was as good as the original movie. I will say that, and I stand by that. I did enjoy it. Like I said, I enjoyed about half of the extended footage a lot, and appreciated having like more to it. It's a good one. It was interesting. They added all the Faramir stuff, so you learn more about like their background and how like the Steward of Gondor was their father. Like, kind of was like, hey, like, could you get the ring from Mordor? Could you, or for Gondor? I mean, could you get it back to us? We could use it in our fight with Mordor. It'd be great.
Yeah, I do like you mentioned that you were like, we don't really need this to him coming up and telling them about the meeting. Like previous, because I guess there was originally storyboarded out a prologue to kind of be like, this is the story so far, and I guess Peter Jackson fought like for a long time with New Line to cut that out.
And they're like, please no, we can't. They were like, oh, that's like 7 minutes we could use to be telling the story of this 3-hour movie.
Yeah,
you know. But they even mentioned too, like, the way you started with Gandalf fighting Balrog, you're like, oh, okay, this fight happened, and it catches you up just enough. If you've seen the other movie, it brings you right up to speed. And then they're talking about even in the middle, because they kind of do the Arwen Aragorn thing. They do their back and forth, and they do a flashback to when they're in Rivendell together. It does kind of help a little bit.
Yeah,
but it's also in the middle of the movie. I don't know, but it is weird. They give the backstory to Boromir 2 hours in film time after his death, where it's like,
well, yeah, but they show it because that's when Faramir is like being like, he's my brother, right? And he says that, and then it goes to that, which I feel like a lot of the stuff, the extended trilogy is really, I feel like, meant to be watched one right after another, like all together. Because there's points like that which explains Faramir more, which then you watch the next movie and it's like, oh yeah, but if you're like, if you're just gonna be like, I'm gonna watch Two Towers today, and you haven't
watched Fellowship of the Ring recently, you're kind of like,
then I would never tell someone.
Yeah,
I would never tell someone to just sit down and watch one of the extended editions.
Yeah,
if you just want to watch that because you're like, I like the battle scene at the end and this story, that's my favorite, or I just want to watch Return of the King because I like that one, I'd be like, just watch the theatrical then.
Yeah.
No, I would never say watch the extended because there's so much of it that's supposed to feed into bits on the other ones.
I do appreciate it, and it is nice to have a fresh take, like having watched these movies so many times growing up and having not seen them for like 5 or 6 years. It's nice to get the added juice, the additional sweetness, the additional layers in the biscuit, in the flaky biscuit that is Lord of the Rings, having another 2 layers.
Yeah. It's interesting when I watch these movies, and I'll watch them like at a friend's house or something, they'll be not extended. I'm like, it feels like they cut out entire storylines.
Yeah, which is crazy because, I mean, with the exception of like the Faramir thing, there aren't a lot of really long scenes, like we
Yeah.
talked before. It's just little bits here and there that flesh out parts of the story.
Yeah, but I probably watched these extendeds, all three of them, at least once a year for the past 10 years, and yeah, it's weird to watch the not extended.
Yeah, I can imagine.
There's so much missing.
But I do feel like every time there's an extended bit, I notice it, where I'm like, haven't seen that before. So I can imagine doing the reverse. You'd be like, something's gone, something's not here.
Yeah. There's so much, Cody. There's so many facts that aren't really interesting in any way about these movies. You know what I mean? They're like, Todd was also in Hercules, and he played a background dwarf in The Hobbit. And it's like, I don't care about Todd.
Todd sucks.
Yeah.
We don't like Todd.
Tell me more about Viggo Mortensen being crazy.
Tell me about Viggo. What did he do?
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's I like how in my little list of facts, the person that noted that scene as incredibly important, that flashback with Boromir and Faramir.
Oh, it's crucial. Otherwise, the movie doesn't make sense. It's like, what is Helm's Deep? We've got to see the Boromir thing to know about that.
I like how this note is, this scene is very important because it explains that Denethor is a terrible father and explains the motivation of his sons.
Oh, I mean, I could say a lot about that, but I would spoil so much of Return of the King.
He's a terrible father.
Like, it's obvious all of Return of the King, like, he is the absolute worst, and we all hate him. Okay.
Fun fact for the... no fun fact, but I have fun facts later. Also, his
guard them.
father's name was Ecthelion, which is a cool name.
That is pretty cool. There are some cool names. Of all the fantasy writer people, I feel like Tolkien nailed the name. Maybe it's just because he was a linguist, but he does a pretty good job with his names.
You don't like Martin, who just goes with like Jeff and George and Greg and other names that start with a G, Yeah. Or
it is funny because like with them you're like Lannister and you're like Tyrion, you're like Jamie, what? They do hop where you're like, ooh, cool fantasy name, like, oh, Hank. You're like, you got another one?
Yeah. Or
Daenerys, ooh. What's the other one?
J.K. Rowling, who just steals names from other properties that I really don't know how she got away with it.
Aberforth. I like Aberforth, though. You like Aberforth.
Yeah, I like
Aberforth.
Aberforth. The one that shows up and he's like, hey, Dumbledore that everybody likes? Yeah, he sucked. And he was
like,
the worst.
By the way, I don't do anything. He's like, I mean, if your brother is like the guy who destroyed the evil wizard, fought the evil wizard and is the professor of the magic school and did all the cool stuff, I feel
and
is gay.
Is gay. There you go.
Has the man with a literal beard. A literal and a figurative beard. Because he never told anyone, but JK, she'll throw him out of the closet.
Yeah.
It's beside the point.
Yeah.
Two Towers is a good movie, and I do think it's funny because people do put it's the worst one, but it's also like in the IMDb top 15 movies. You're like, it's like 8.7, 8.9 for Return of the King, and this one's like an 8.65. You're like, yeah, it's right. There's good.
Fourth highest grossing film of all time.
It's impressive.
The Fellowship was the fifth. This is the fourth. And I'm pretty sure Return of the King is like, what, second or third? Or is it just third? Is it just straight up third?
Probably. It is amazing what they did with their budget, and that they did so much, and the effects look so good, and I just think that New Zealanders are better people than all of us, and we could learn something from them.
Yeah. It had a whole extra $1 million in its budget than the first one, though.
Well, that's all that money went straight into Andy Serkis's Gollum juice budget.
Made 10 times its budget.
That is crazy. When you think about like Marvel movies spending $300 million like on Endgame or whatever, it's like, yeah, you made 4 or 5 times your budget, but can you make 10 times your budget?
Yeah. It's like the movie I sent you, which was Panda Warrior.
Panda Warrior.
Which made roughly 1,500 times less than the first Kung Fu Panda movie.
I couldn't believe that. It's this trailer for like a Kung Fu Panda ripoff.
Oh,
And
it's a ripoff for
it's
sure.
so great because like they steal the fonts from Kung Fu Panda. It's like a chubby bear that shouldn't fight but does fight. And then what got me is the list of voice actors. Because it was like 2 people I knew, 1 person whose sibling I know, and then like 3 randos. I'm like, what is this? They're like, Haley Duff. You're like, Hillary Duff's sister? Like, Norm Macdonald. Like, what? The guy from Saturday Night Live 20 years ago? And then Tom Kenny. You're like, oh, of course, Tom Kenny has to be in it if it's animated.
Yeah. What about Rob Schneider? It seems like this is what I thought was second I saw that trailer. Which, if you do yourself a favor, look up The Adventures of Jin Bao Panda Warrior. That is the name of the series. The name of the show, I mean. The movie. It looks like the kind of movie that they would have a trailer for in a Rick and Morty episode. Because it's right. Like every single bad movie, right. They're like, Rob Schneider is this thing.
Is Schlorpy. Yeah.
Because can't you just see the clip, Rob Schneider is Panda Warrior. And then it just cuts to the just bad animation.
Oh, man. People really got their value out of this. We're talking 2 Towers. We're talking Game of Thrones. We're talking Panda Warrior.
Panda Warrior.
Talking J.K. Rowling verse. 2 Towers is great. It's a good movie, and I'm very excited to finish it. I'm excited that it's 4.5 hours. I'm ready for it.
So good. It's the best one.
Or 4 hours. How long is it? It's just
4.5.
It's a lot. Is the original like 3.5 hours or something? Like 3 hours 20?
Theatrical is 3 hours 20.
Oh, so good.
So it's 4 hours and 10 minutes.
So they added a full like 50 minutes?
Yeah.
That's like almost as long as Panda Warrior.
It has more effect shots than The Fellowship and 2 Towers combined.
Wow.
It is the second highest grossing film.
It is crazy because they talk about how they created a whole AI computer simulator to create the computer orcs, which I didn't know. You're like, oh, they made all the wide shots. It's just computer generated orcs that are all AI, and they're like, oh, do I fight this person? Like, all have logic built in. Like, is there a person? I should fight. Am I smart? I'll block. If I'm not smart, I get hit. And you're like, whoa, that's crazy because in those watches, and like they combine it all with the models they created, and it looks great. It looks like a real awesome epic battle. Like there's 10,000 orcs there. Yeah,
which they made it the first time in this one, right? And then they made it. They like had to double its capacity or something for the next one because they like tried to run it and it crashed or something like that. But that's what this one is, which I was like, that's cool because I mean now you have things like the battle simulator games, which are made from but it's like people are like, yeah, but we have those, but it's like. That simulator game where you can put like a legion of Roman soldiers and like Celtic warriors and make them fight was built from that.
That's crazy.
Like that required a supercomputer and people have boiled it down to now they can make it a computer game.
It's fascinating. It was interesting too because they were at such like a time crunch for all of their like they were barely going to meet the delivery date for the movie and it was just like they had to be in Abbey Road Studios mixing the music and then back in New Zealand at Weta finishing the effects and they talked about how they did like satellite feeds and using the internet to like and hard drives to send everything back and forth and in like the time of quarantine where everyone's doing virtual meetings it's so crazy to be like oh they were doing this 20 years ago to stretch Peter Jackson out so he could be in 3 places at once and like consult with everybody. This is really interesting.
It is interesting, like, if you boil it down and, like, really look how much of what we take for granted now, not even just in the movie industry, but in, like, just in a ton of industries, how much technology and techniques for doing stuff came from these 3 films.
Yeah. That's pretty impressive. One of the stories I liked, they told, like, they used iPods as hard drives to, like, send the stills and the images back and forth to each other. And one of the guys had the entire movie on one iPod, and he was going to take it to Peter Jackson in like London, somewhere in England. I think it might have been in London, but there were some like street toughs that started walking behind him. So he broke into a full sprint. He's like a quick dude. And so he outran them to get to the hotel because he's like, they're going to take this iPod with the entire Two Towers movie on it. And he'd like outrun them to get to the hotel where Peter Jackson was waiting for it. Just crazy. Oh, yeah. You're like,
they knew.
We used our iPods. It was like the first iPods, like big white brick with like the actual buttons on it, even before like the scroll wheel. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I used to watch movies on the nanos.
That was such a big deal when I was like, I can watch a movie on my iPod Nano with my 2-inch screen.
Oh, I don't even think it was full 2 inches. And now I'm like, I can't even imagine watching a movie.
Yeah.
Oh,
how far we've come.
I watched Two Towers online.
You did?
Oh, yeah. Not the first time. I went to go see it in the theaters like a big boy. Wow. I have my ticket. My ticket for the opening release, for like the first showing of Return of the King.
It was a big deal when I saw this because I was very young and I was a little scaredy cat and I was like, Gollum's so scary. I don't know if I can do it. And then because he's only in that like one shot in Fellowship of the Ring, you know?
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, he's kind of ominous, kind of scary, and I was like, I don't know if I want to see it. And then I did, and I'm a much braver boy now. Yeah. I'm stronger than I ever was.
I will say to this day though, if I like picture a creepy little monster, it's always Gollum. Gollum is the first thing I go to.
Mm-hmm. I'm really excited. There's so much I'm excited for in the next movie, but I'm really excited for the Smeagol scene where they do his whole thing. I'm
excited to find out how Viggo Mortensen injured himself and tried to play through it, and they forced him to go to the doctor. That's what I'm excited for.
I'm excited. It's a good one.
Yeah. If you're excited, you can tweet us.
At Opinion Havers, I've been getting some hot tweets lately. I respond to almost all of them. We're here. I'm here to listen. If you're sad, tweet me. If you're happy, tweet me. If you want to fight me, meet me behind the flagpole. Let's go.
Yep.
You can share us with your friends, with your enemies, with strangers on the street.
Yeah, just like type in a random email address, send it to them.
And drop them a hot link to.
You know what? Make fake accounts and give us good ratings. Do that. You know,
please do.
Whatever.
We appreciate all of it. Spend $50 for a Chinese bot to write 1,000 reviews of us.
They'll be like, such good many moons fun time. I don't know if you've ever read those those
worked exactly as expected.
Exactly. There you go. I like leaving those kinds of reviews because they're like, someone's gonna be like, "That's a bot." And I'm like, no, it's not.
Oh well, thank you so much for listening. Until next time, watch movies
and have opinions. Oh, my elbow. Give me a good stinger, Cody. Give me a good one.
We found the big cats.
The Kit Kats, the big cats.
Kit Kats, the big cats. We found them.
Now you know. And knowing is?
Feeling.
Yes.